Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. Recently, the U.S. has repeatedly claimed that China has violated the consensus reached at the Sino-U.S. Geneva Economic and Trade Talks and has taken a series of negative actions. U.S. officials, including Treasury Secretary Besson, specifically pointed out that China did not relax rare earth exports as agreed. On Sunday, U.S. Commerce Secretary Ladanik accused China of dragging its feet in reaching a trade agreement with the U.S. He also threatened that Beijing would no longer have access to the U.S. market for Chinese goods, and Washington used this as a reason to introduce multiple pressure measures against China. In response, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said that the U.S. side's accusations against China are completely unfounded, and urged the U.S. to respect the facts. Stop spreading false information. Lin Jianhua, spokesperson for the Ministry of Commerce, had already made China's firm position clear on this issue. The Geneva Consensus was reached based on the principles of mutual respect and equal consultation between China and the U.S. China has been implementing the Geneva Consensus in a responsible manner, but the U.S., without any factual basis, has smeared and accused China, imposed chip export controls against China, and suspended chip design cooperation with China. Software sales. Announcing the revocation of Chinese students' visas and other extreme suppression measures have seriously undermined the Geneva Consensus and also harmed China's legitimate rights and interests. China firmly opposes this and has already lodged a strong protest. Lin Jian stressed that exerting pressure and coercion are not the right ways to engage with China. China urges the U.S. to respect the facts and stop spreading false information, correct these wrongful actions and use concrete steps to uphold the consensus reached by both sides. In fact, the recent incident where U.S. Treasury Secretary Besson complained about China holding back rare earths, only to be contradicted soon after, is a direct example. According to a Bloomberg report on June 2, Michael Hart, president of the American Chamber of Commerce in China, said that China has not blocked rare earth exports, it's just that the approval process for export prices is slower than expected. He said, "From what I see, an approval is in progress, but of course the process is slower than what the industry expected." Some of the delays are related to China using a new system for export approvals, not because exports are not allowed. According to China's relevant export control laws and regulations, the Ministry of Commerce issued notices on April 4 and 9, 2025. They issued announcement number 21 and number 22 respectively, putting a total of 28 U.S. entities on the export control list. Last month, a spokesperson from the Ministry of Commerce said that, in order to implement the consensus reached at the high-level China-U.S. economic and trade talks, they decided to suspend these related measures for 90 days starting from May 14, 2025. If exporters need to export dual-use items to any of these 28 entities, they must apply to the Ministry of Commerce in accordance with the relevant regulations of the Export Control Regulations on Dual-Use Items of the People's Republic of China. The Ministry of Commerce will conduct a review in accordance with the law and regulations, and those that meet the requirements will be granted a license. According to data from the United States Geological Survey, China accounts for nearly 70% of the world's rare earth production. Since many high-end American products, from fighter jets to electric vehicles, are highly dependent on rare earth controls are seen as a trump card for China to counter the U.S. On May 29, Ministry of Commerce spokesperson He Yunqi said at a regular press conference that imposing export controls on civil aviation products with clear dual-use military and civilian attributes is a common international practice. As a responsible country, China's implementation of export controls on relevant sensitive items reflects its consistent stance of upholding world peace and regional stability. After the U.S.-China economic and trade talks in Geneva, the Trump administration successively introduced a number of new discriminatory restrictions against China, including issuing guidelines for export controls on AI chips and halting the sale of chip design software, EDA, to China. Announcing the revocation of Chinese student visas and similar actions have caused serious disruption and damage, even though both sides had reached a consensus. Simply put, the U.S. still uses various excuses to suppress China, and whenever there's a disagreement, they just wave the stick of sanctions or take other measures. On one hand, China needs to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. On the other, it also has to show it is reasonable and well-founded, so the world can see what the U.S. is like under Trump's leadership. How unreasonable and unreliable they are. According to a recent global public opinion poll, Trump's announcement of the America First trade protectionist policy is actually undermining America's soft power. Some foreign media even described it this way: the poll shows that Trump's foreign policy isn't making America great again, but is actually helping China become great again. According to reports from the US political news site Axios and the UK's Independent on June 2, the latest poll by Morning Consult shows that China's global favorability is steadily rising. At the same time, the international community's perception of the US has clearly declined. According to the survey, the US's net favorability has dropped sharply from over positive 20 at the beginning of 2024 to negative 1.5 by the end of May 2025. And as for China, its score has risen to positive 8.8. This poll covered people from 41 countries, including Canada, France, Japan, and Russia, and the results were calculated by taking the difference between the proportion of respondents with a positive view and those with a negative view. The report from Morning Consult pointed out that since Trump returned to the White House this January, the U.S.'s international reputation has taken a nosedive. The data shows that, except for Russia, the vast majority of respondents from other countries have a noticeably worse impression of the United States. As for China, its favorability has generally improved. The survey found that at the beginning of 2025, out of the 41 countries, 29 had a higher favorability rating for the U.S. than for China. But by April 30, only 13 countries still supported the U.S. more, while many countries that already supported China at the start of the year continued to do so. Now, these countries have become even more supportive of China, with their favorability towards China increasing. Most of this improvement started in March. After Trump announced the Liberation Day tariff measures, China's reputation saw a significant boost. The report states that after Washington announced reciprocal tariffs on April 2, 2025, the U.S.'s global standing dropped to its lowest point. This caused the U.S.'s net favorability to fall into negative territory for the first time since January 2022. The reputational damage caused by the Liberation Day tariff announcement has now become a fact. According to the report, the decline in America's reputation has already led to real economic losses. Affected by White House policies, the number of foreign tourists has sharply decreased. Mike Mann, head of the Political Intelligence Division at a dollar depreciation consulting firm, said that as global perceptions of the U.S. worsen, American companies are also seeing their overseas trade and investment opportunities shrink. Consumers are refusing to buy American products, which in turn affects the U.S.'s ability to create jobs abroad. In addition, some people are worried that the Trump administration's ban on international students will also bring losses to the U.S. Fonta O, executive director of the Association of International Educators based in Washington, once said in a statement that expelling international students will have a long-term impact on the future talent pipeline of the U.S. Losing the contributions of international students will weaken American students' understanding of the world, and will have serious consequences for the U.S.'s economic strength, security, and global competitiveness. This outcome is actually the opposite of what the current administration claims: to make America safer, greater, and more prosperous. Former U.S. Treasury Secretary and former Harvard University president, Smith, also strongly criticized the Trump administration's decision to stop Harvard from admitting international students, saying that this approach is malicious, illegal, and irresponsible, and extremely harmful. Smith also said that cutting off opportunities for foreign students to exchange will damage the U.S. economy and national security. It also goes against the fundamental principles of the United States as a democratic country. What Trump is doing will be a huge gift to other countries competing for the international student market, because it's basically the U.S. doing its best to help the higher education systems in the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. According to Morning Consult, there's a glimmer of hope only after Trump suspended the so-called reciprocal tariffs. The United States' global standing has recently started to rebound. After Trump lowered tariffs on Chinese goods in May, the U.S.'s rating also saw a slight uptick. But just a month later, Trump claimed that China had completely violated the tariff agreement, and at the same time, he baselessly accused China of failing to speed up rare earth exports. In response, on June 2, a spokesperson from the Ministry of Commerce refuted these claims, stating that after the joint statement was released by both China and the U.S. on May 12, China had acted in accordance with the consensus reached in the joint statement. China canceled or suspended the relevant tariff and non-tariff measures that were imposed in response to U.S. tariffs, acting with a responsible attitude, taking matters seriously, strictly implementing the agreements, and actively upholding the consensus reached at the Geneva trade talks. As for safeguarding its own interests, China has firmly implemented the consensus. This is integrity. The spokesperson also pointed out, in contrast, the U.S. side's actions. After the Geneva trade talks, the U.S. has successively introduced a number of new discriminatory and restrictive measures, including issuing guidelines for AI chip export controls, halting sales of chip design software, EDA, to China, and announcing the revocation of Chinese students' visas. These actions seriously violate the consensus reached during the phone call between the two heads of state on January 17, severely undermine the existing consensus from the Geneva trade talks, and seriously harm China's legitimate interests. The U.S. keeps unilaterally stirring up new trade frictions, making the bilateral economic and trade relationship even more uncertain and unstable. Not only do they refuse to reflect on their own actions, but they even try to shift the blame, groundlessly accusing China of violating the consensus. This is a serious distortion of the facts, and China firmly rejects these unreasonable accusations. According to a global poll, it's no wonder that netizens on the mainland call Trump Comrade Chuan Jiangwo. The more Trump unreasonably suppresses China, on one hand, it actually motivates China to pursue independent innovation, and on the other hand, it exposes the hypocritical side of the U.S. He openly tries to seize other countries' territories and clearly wants to take control of other nations' resources. This will seriously damage America's soft power. Hello everyone, besides videos on Bus Daily, we also have video content on another platform, SEK Lao Toy. SEK Lao Toy offers a lot of exclusive content, and we welcome viewers from around the world to subscribe. Just search for Bus Daily on the internet. You can access SEK Lao Toy's content by visiting the Bus Daily website. Producing this content requires a lot of resources, so I hope you'll support Bus Daily and subscribe to SEK Lao Toy. With your support, I can keep making these programs. Thank you, everyone.